In the past, I put together my videos using an outline format that I put together, and then submitting it to Claude and having them submit scripts. Well, lately Claude has made some changes as an AI program, and I don't like them very much, so I decided not to subscribe anymore, so I've lost the ability to do that. Today I'll be doing Proverbs 10. I've outlined it and written up my own kind of script, and we'll see how this works. This is for Proverbs 10. This is Proverbs for Modern Life, and I'm William Tarbush. This video will be called Wisdom's Two Ways. The contrast established is in verse 1. A wise son versus a foolish son, and the stakes for family. Verse 1 says, A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother. This is just saying that parents rejoice in the child's wisdom. It's showing both parents. It's showing two different ways that parents can be celebratory or upset. And the way that it's shown is a Hebrew style statement, showing that this is just referring to the parents. Verses 2 through 5 and 15 and 16 and verse 22 refer to wealth, work, and God's provision. Verse 2 talks about ill-gotten gain versus righteousness that delivers. Verse 3 says, The Lord will not allow the righteous to hunger, but he will reject the craving of the wicked. It is not only work habits that are the security of the wise. Good work habits are vital. One may still be troubled with strong habits. God promises that he won't give... that's for a later verse. Diligent hands versus lazy hands in verse 4 through 5. In verse 15, wealth is a fortified city, and poverty is ruin. The wages of righteousness versus the earnings of wickedness is in verse 16. True wealth comes from the Lord's blessing, not toil alone. It is the blessing of the Lord that makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it, is in verse 22. It's saying that one can be rich without the Lord, but that wealth can be ill-gotten. The wealth given by the Lord has few troubles attached. It doesn't mean that you won't have trouble if you're wealthy with the Lord. It simply means that it won't have been given only because of the wealth. That anybody will have trouble, but there'll be extra trouble added to it for the one who gets as ill on their own. Verses 6 through 9 are about character, reputation, and integrity. Blessing crowns the righteousness. Violence marks the wicked. It says, verse 6, I compare it to Genesis 49:26. Blessings come to the head of the one who is distinguished among his brothers. Names are remembered in blessing versus names that rot in verse 7. Being remembered versus being forgotten is an important marker of the wise and virtuous. It's very important in the Hebrew Bible to be remembered, and this is a reflection of that. The wise receive instruction, and the fool chatter towards ruin is in verse 8. Integrity brings security, and crooked paths lead to exposure in verse 9. Verse 8 and 9 says, The wise of the heart will receive commands, but a babbling fool will be ruined. He who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will be found out. That's from the NASB. Too much talking can lead to telling one's own secrets. Better to speak with integrity. I've heard it said that if you lie once, you have to remember what you said, so it leads to more lies. But if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember that. Verses 10 through 14, 18 through 21, and 31 and 32 are on the power of the tongue. Words that harm include malicious winking and violent mouths, verses 10 and 11. The mouth of the righteousness is the fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. That's verse 11. And of course, too much talking is seen as foolish in verse 8 and 9. Hatred that stirs up conflict is in verse 12a. Concealed hatred and slander in verse 18. The fool's mouth that invites ruin is in 14. Multiplying words multiplies sin. So the more words you say, the more likely you are to sin. That reflects what we talked about in the, verses 8 and 9. Words that heal. Love that covers wrongs is in verse 12. Wisdom on the lips of the discerning, verse 13. Verse 13 says, on the lips of the discerning wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. The righteous mouth is the fountain of life, is in verse 11. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, in verse 20 and 21. The mouth of the righteous bears the fruit of wisdom, in verse 31 and 32. And then we go to verses 8, 13, 17, and 23 for discipline, wisdom, and folly. The wise accept commands, the fool resists. Wisdom is found on discerning lips. The senseless need correction. Verse 13 says, on the lips of the discerning, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks understanding. Verse 13. Our discernment isn't only required in understanding, it is also required through speech patterns, like not talking too much. Heeding discipline marks the path of life. He is on the path of life who heeds instruction, but he who ignores reproof goes astray. Verse 17. The fool delights in wicked schemes, the wise delight in understanding. Verse 23. Verses 24 through 30 are on the fear of the Lord and final outcomes. What the wicked dread comes upon them. The righteous receive their stay. Verse 24. The storm sweeps away the wicked, the righteous stands firm. Verse 25. The sluggard, that's the lazy person, is a burden to others. Verse 26. And then verse 26 is like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes. So is the lazy one who sends him. The lazy one, a sluggard, is an irritation to society, much as vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes. Anyone who's sat around a campfire will know about smoke to the eyes. Fear of the Lord adds length to life. The wicked are cut short, is in verse 27. The righteous have hope and joy. The wicked have nothing. Verse 28. The Lord's way is refuge to the blameless, ruin for the evil. Verse 29 says, the way of the Lord is a stronghold to the upright, but a ruin to the workers of iniquity. The righteous are never uprooted. The wicked do not remain. Verse 30. And the theme being that Proverbs 10 establishes the foundational contrast that runs through the entire collection. The way of wisdom and righteousness leads to life, security, and blessing. The way of folly and wickedness leads to ruin, exposure, and death. The tongue, work ethic, and response to discipline are key daily arenas where those two ways play out. Thank you for coming to my video. If you appreciate what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. And that's all for this week. I'll try to get chapter 11 up whenever I can. Maybe next week, it may be the week after. It's become much harder without Claude running everything, and I'm only building the outlines and trying to add in comments. It's not going to be as polished, but I still think it's valuable for me to go through this, both for me and for you. So have a good day.